You are listening to ProveText, a Glossa House podcast exploring Scripture with Dr. T. Michael W. Halcomb and Dr. Frederick J. Long. Welcome and enjoy.
I'm here today with my friend Gary. Gary, how are you? Gary Manning Jr., if you want the full name. But Gary, how are you doing?
I am doing well and really glad to be joining you today.
Yeah. So interesting story. I've been in Hawaii about 5.5 years now, but you grew up here. And I think you left probably right before I showed up, or soon before
I've been teaching here at Biola University for 12 years. So that was when I left. But my wife and I grew up in Hawaii and then returned there after my grad school. And so some of our kids were born there, and we miss it a lot. Actually, I got my first exposure to New Testament scholarship was in Sunday school. My Sunday school teacher in second grade was David Black's mother.
Oh,
David,
wow.
Yeah. And so she loved to talk about him, and he came and preached a few times when he was home in Hawaii. He was a big wave surfer. Now he isn't. He's a professor of New Testament, published a lot of great books on Greek and the New Testament. And so I remember actually seeing his dissertation when I was a little kid and thinking, oh my goodness, this is a whole book about one word in Paul. That was my first exposure to formal New Testament scholarship.
Wow, I had no idea his mom was your Sunday school teacher. I didn't even know he was a big wave surfer. I knew he surfed a little bit, but I've had lunch with him when he's come back and stuff. He's visited our congregation on a Sunday. And,
great! He's a great man.
Yeah, he's a good guy, David Allen Black. His was the grammar that I cut my teeth on.
Yeah,
actually. That was my starter.
Yeah, in fact, when I first started teaching Greek as an adjunct professor, he was also a professor here at Biola, and I actually got my job because he left. He was adjunct and he got a full-time job somewhere else, and so I got my adjunct position.
Oh, wow. Wow, that's a really cool connection. I didn't realize that. I need to get back in touch with him and see if he's coming back anytime soon. But so you're at Biola, and for the listeners who may not know you, tell them a little bit about what you do there.
So I'm a New Testament professor teaching at the grad school. So Talbot School of Theology is our grad school at Biola, our School of Theology, our seminary. Mainly I teach New Testament classes. I'm also the director of our Master of Divinity program. But my main day-to-day work is teaching New Testament classes and writing and some administrative things. Yeah,
so one of your things in addition to Greek is, I know you have a focus on the Gospel of John.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about what you've done in John, or what you're doing in John, what you hope to do in John. What would be of interest to some folks?
Yeah, that's been my major focus. Obviously, I spend time in other places in the New Testament, but I did my dissertation in the Gospel of John and got that published back in 2003, a while ago, and most of my academic research and writing has been in the Gospel of John. Right now, I'm working on a commentary on the Gospel of John in the Lexham Research Commentary, which is a digital commentary being published by Logos Bible Software. There's about three books of the Bible are done for that series. And it's a little bit, one of its unique things is that because it's a digital commentary, it can make a lot of use of quick links. So anytime I give a reference, you can click on it and take you over to whatever reference is useful for that topic.
Yeah, those hyperlinks. That's one of the big payoffs with something like Logos, right? Just the quickness of linking resources and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So you're also pretty active online. I mean, on Facebook, I think you're one of the administrators of that large group called Nerdy Language Majors. And,
yes.
I see.
We changed it to nerdy biblical language majors.
Okay.
People were trying to join to talk about French or other things, and we wanted to make sure that they knew we were doing Greek and Hebrew and Aramaic and, maybe some other ones, but mainly early biblical languges. Yeah. So, yeah, it's a lot of fun. Yeah.
Yeah, you're pretty active on there. I mean, you've got. I'm pretty impressed with just the breadth of what you can speak to Greek-wise. And that's all.
Thanks. Yeah, for me, it's a fun thing because sometimes it's a time eater, but we're engaging with everything from students to other scholars, and people post questions, and sometimes I think, oh, that is a really fun question. Let me, and then I go spend some time on it when maybe I should be spending time on my own research. But in the process, I learn a lot of things that I wouldn't have thought to ask, and then I also sometimes post questions or requests for resources, and other people will post useful stuff. So it's a great community, and I think it helps students who are kind of on the beginning end, but also we have a lot of scholars interacting.
You and I have worked on. It's funny because we've worked on a book together, and we've never even met in person. I mean, we've met online, but never like physically shaking hands.
Yeah.
And we worked
I'll be in Hawaii next summer, so we will shake hands then.
There you go. I'm looking forward to that. We worked on the Hippocratic Oath. It's this illustrated book together, very vivid illustrations. And another one of the things I appreciate about you is just the ability. I think maybe you're better at it than anyone else I've seen, but the ability to do Greek composition or to do like bi-directional translation.
It's fun. It's hard work, isn't it?
It is. Oh my gosh, it's so challenging. Yeah. And when I'm doing that, I feel like I'm okay at it, but I always feel like it kind of needs someone looking over my shoulder, to say, oh, nope, needs to be in the genitive or, something.
Yeah. And then, what I always remind myself of is everyone knows the experience of opening some directions to something you purchased, and you find out that they hired somebody in a factory in another country to write the directions in English, and they just used a dictionary. And it's technically the right words, sort of, but they don't know English idioms or proper English word order, right? And so I'm always thinking, oh my goodness, nobody is so fluent at Greek today, at ancient Greek, that they can just flawlessly produce, this prose without error. And so for me, it's often a lot of research into I'll see a phrase in English and think, I think that's idiomatic in English. It's not a cross-linguistic phrase.
Right.
And I'll think, man, where can I find someone saying something like that in ancient Greek? And so I'll go into some of my ancient Greek resources and see if I can find someone saying something similar in real Greek documents. Real Greek literature. I mean,
you've turned into quite the sleuth for that. Again, that's one of those things that, boy, it's just impressive the way you are able to uncover some of those idiomatic correspondences. When I was writing the little book called Speak Koine Greek, I don't know how long that's been out, but that's just small little phrases like "How are you?" and "What is your name?" and just very, very elementary, basic. That
is this
in
it?
Of itself.
Here we go. Nope, that's another one.
It's a little companion sort of volume to that.
Yeah, this one had some cool comics in it. I happened to be looking at it this morning with some short phrases. I was laughing at you saying how to say the two guys were giving a high five, and of course high five is a very specifically modern English idiom. And so what do you do with that? You can make up something funny in that case. So, but when you're publishing it, of course, you have this sense that there's going to be some guy out there who's a classicist who is going to, say that's not the right way to say it, and you just really don't want to do that when you're publishing something.
Yep. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's the tough thing about it. I mean, and for those of us like in the conversational side of Greek things, like we're trying to always push the, car a little more forward. And even in those circles, I find that it's really tough because you have people who are kind of like in a purists kind of camp. And then I wouldn't like put myself in that. I would be more in like a creative, all right, let's work with what we have. And if we need to reconstruct and, build something new, let's do that. Then some people are very opposed to that sort of thing. And want it to be as pure as possible. And,
when I was translating Peter Rabbit, I did the 3 Peter Rabbit stories, or Rabbit stories from Beatrix Potter, and translated them into Greek. And it was interesting how much I learned about both English and Greek. I was thinking of an example is Peter Rabbit is running from Mr. McGregor, and he escapes just in time. Okay, we might just think, nobody stops to think about the phrase just in time. We say that without even thinking about its meaning, but say that in Greek, try to translate the word just. I mean, no clue about how to do that. It turns out I looked around and found that there were several places that were definitely communicating something like that, but instead of using a word like just, they would just say en Cairo, in time, which meant there's no more time left, And so sometimes you have to pick a different idiom that doesn't quite, that isn't quite the same as what you expect it to be in English.
Yeah, that's interesting. I was thinking like something like "enoligo hero" or something like that. But very, very interesting. You do a swell job at
Thank you.
Taking English and putting it into ancient Greek. You do a really good job at that.
Thank you. Makes you think also a lot about the whole process of translating the Bible. How do you figure out what the idiom means in Greek, and then how much do you keep that idiom the same in English? How much do you change it so that it matches English idiom? It's one of those standard things that translators always have to deal with.
Yeah, one of the idioms that when I did that little Speak Koine Greek book, I searched weeks, months even for an analogous phrase to "you're welcome."
Yes, me too. I did.
It's so prevalent, right, in English.
Yeah,
but we don't have that anywhere in Koine.
Yeah,
right, or even classical that I could find.
Yeah,
I don't know what you found. I searched high and low. I finally landed on something. It was more of a parallel to Spanish, like de nada, and I came up with "Udin the Aferi," which is
I remember seeing that. Yeah. Even thank you, if you notice. We can say use Eucharistia or Eucharisto, Evcharisto, but it's interesting how often the Greeks use the phrase "you did well," which is what you also get occasionally in the epistles, poies kalos, to do well. I ran across it in a letter by Plato where he says somebody did something and he said, "You did well in doing this," and the Loeb translator translated as "thank you for doing this."
Interesting.
So you can use Evcharisto or some equivalent, but you can also find other ways of saying it that don't sound very natural in English.
Yeah, it's really. Yeah, I don't know. So I hope we keep creating resources that help us make headway in this regard. I mean, they're needed, and all that stuff's useful in like a language learning classroom. Let's talk about that actually. You're teaching Greek right now, and that's something you've been doing for years. Wondering, what does your Greek class look like? What does a Greek 1 or a Greek 2 look like for you?
Yeah, so I have never. I've tried to slowly add in some conversational things, but that's not how I learned Greek, and it would take an awful lot to shift them over, especially with just sort of years of doing it one way and the way our institution does it. So we're normally doing translation, weekly translation from the scripture, so kind of a somewhat traditional way. If I had more time, I certainly would be adding in more conversation and more composition, helping students to compose. Now, something I worked on this year for my first semester students, there's this principle from modern language acquisition studies that if you see a word 12 times in different contexts, different endings, if those words have different endings in that language, different forms, that's one of the best ways to get a handle on that word, rather than just sort of, we do flashcards, flash programs, which I think are good. They have their place. Yeah. So I started to do something which I'm sure has already been done by some other people, but I have a bunch of well-known English verses with just the Greek word replaced. And then I find 12 fairly well-known verses, sometimes with the various shades of meaning. So, for example, when they're learning charis, they're going to get those places where it's a little bit more on the favor end, and verses where it's a little bit more on the grace end, grace, generosity kind of end of the meaning spectrum. And so by just seeing it in a bunch of places, and they don't have to translate yet because they can't really translate those sentences, but they see their English sentence, one Greek word with its ending, even if they don't understand that ending yet. And got some good response from using that through part of last summer with Greek. And so I'm trying to add more. It turns out to take a lot of time to get 12 verses for every one. Yeah. If you're learning 450 Greek words, it's just time consuming. So, but I got some good responses from students that helped them actually grab onto vocab words rather than just memorizing them in isolation.
Yeah. So I think I would refer to that as what we would call interlanguage, right? So you're in this interlanguage state where you're between the languages, right? And you can mix and match both. Yeah, I think that can be very helpful. 'Cause that's a creative idea to be doing it that way. What textbook are you using, or do you not use a textbook?
We use Mounts. I have a full set of online lectures, and so I don't really refer to the textbook much. That's for their reference, but I follow his order. I actually learned. I started my first year Greek was classical Greek at the University of Hawaii, and I use a classical Greek workbook from the professor. So when I started teaching, I used Mounts because it's the one we use here. But I kind of use it as it's interesting. I sort of feel like my experience with languages is I learn them in the classroom, and the textbooks are helpful, but they're not the primary way for me. When I learned Hebrew, I just remember it was in the classroom, practicing translating together, learning from the professor, and I don't remember thinking a whole lot as much about the textbook. And so I try to teach in the same way that they should be able to get everything from the time we spend in the classroom and other resources I give them.
I've met some of those folks over in the UH Classics program. There's a guy named Robert. Do you remember?
My professor is retired long since, but it was funny on the first day of class because he seriously looked like Socrates, Socrates in an aloha shirt.
That's fun.
And he jokingly, the first day we had all the Greek and Latin students together in one class, and he kept talking about how much more beautiful Greek was than Latin, and how Latin was stodgy and not as beautiful, and and then we separated, and he taught the Greek students after the first day, but I actually learned just a lot about actually by our third semester we were reading from the New Testament, and he wanted to expose us to several different eras of Greek and types of Greek. So we actually
it's interesting because I think now. My understanding is that at UH, University of Hawaii, they don't teach classical Greek, they teach Koine Greek. They've been doing that for a little while, and they teach biblical Hebrew, which is very interesting. To find a secular university.
Yeah, that is. Yeah.
But I'm pretty sure that's what they do there at UH. So we're talking about Greek. I'm wondering about, your thoughts on the value of Greek, and we can talk Hebrew or Aramaic or Latin as well, but really just, Greek. We're both Greek guys, but I'm wondering about the value of Greek in like the life of just a Christian. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah. Obviously not every Christian, not even every person in ministry is going to learn Greek, and that's okay. So I feel like it's perhaps related to the concept of gifting or differentiation in the church. Some people should do this. Not everybody should. And for those who do, there's just this huge value in adding to our appreciation of Scripture, adding to our ability to interpret, to oppose false interpretations, all those sorts of things. But I think appreciate is a big deal. I still remember the first time when I dived into, I felt like, okay, I had worked through stuff that I regarded as easier, and I was going to try the book of Revelation for the first time, reading it in Greek. And, you have the close to the beginning, you have these letters that are going to be read aloud to the 7 churches. And I was thinking as I was reading, I thought, this is, I'm reading it the way they heard it. Of course, with my rotten pronunciation. Who knows what pronunciation they were using, but it gave me, it wasn't just about an ability to interpret, but it was the sense of being closer to the audience. I have my students read a short article that talks about the difference between seeing a photograph of the Mona Lisa and actually walking into the Louvre and seeing it. There is a difference. For me, I think of the difference between seeing a photograph of the Grand Canyon, and the first time I saw it, I was just stunned.
Right.
And so I think there's an emotional thing too that for me is still very powerful.
I often open up many of my classes, whether Greek or not. I just taught a class, a 3-day class or something like that on Revelation over on the Big Island, and I opened my class up just by reading, half of the first chapter in Greek, just to reorient people and remind them this wasn't English, right? This was written in a land far away by people long ago in a very different language and a very different context. And
was that at the YWAM school?
Yeah, it was. Yeah. So I do some work with them and enjoy that. I'm a pastor in a church of the Nazarene, and so it's good to sometimes be around the more charismatic side of things and interact with those folks. But yeah, so I think that's important. Appreciation. That's a really, I don't think that can be underestimated. I think for me, I've found that the languages are like, out of all I've done four degrees in Bible college and seminary, 1 in linguistics, and out of all the 5 degrees, the language classes, the language work, that's the gift that keeps giving. Yeah. Yep. Yeah.
Huge payoff. A question I just answered on Nerdy Biblical Language Majors on Facebook a few minutes ago when I should have been working on my John commentary. Somebody asked about growing to a mature man, an aner teleos in Ephesians. And I thought, I wonder what's the background of that. So I did a quick search on TLG, the database of Greek literature, looking for occurrences of aner, man, and teleos, perfect, mature, complete, whatever. And I found out this is a standard word to refer to being an adult. It's often used in contrast to being a boy. You're a boy, and then at some point you become an aner teleos. Sometimes used by philosophers in a way similar to Paul to talk about not just, physically reaching manhood, but reaching maturity. So Plutarch used it that way, and Socrates used it that way. But sometimes people just use it to describe, now I'm a teleos aner. I'm an adult. And that helped me realize, okay, when Paul said this, he was drawing on this, common phrase. He was saying our goal in the church is to present everybody as an adult but not just an adult in Christ, somebody who's reached maturity in Christ. Kind of cool little lesson from looking at it in Greek. So,
yeah, excellent. Oh, those exegetical insights. I mean, especially when you can pull from outside resources to help clarify sort of the socio-cultural aspects of the New Testament world so rich. And again, just a gift that I took a lot of classes through Bible college and seminary, but none of it has, at least, I don't know, maybe I want to say none of it, but I guess comparatively speaking, nothing has come close to lasting and being as fruitful as the language work, which is hard work.
It is,
And, a lot of times I hear people say things like, oh, you just got a gift for languages. And I'm like, I went through 5 degrees.
It's a lot of work, like whether you're gifted or not. Yeah,
decades and lots of time and money to get to this point. I mean, I certainly want to use it as a gift and view it as a gift, but by no means was it easy to even get where I'm at, and I'm not even close to where I want to be.
Yeah. I have a collection of quotes that on why spend your time in this, because years ago, Clint Arnold, who is New Testament chair for a long time here and was our dean until recently, and now stepped back into the classroom. He told me when he hired me, he said, anybody could learn Greek, but they need cheerleading. And I thought, yep, he's right. You need to keep motivated. And so every class, at the beginning of the lecture is a quick quote from somebody in the past who said, this is why the languages matter. So quotes from Erasmus and Luther, and one of them is from Piper. Piper said, if you're in seminary, take all the exegesis classes you can. You can take other courses. You can take courses on ministry at conferences, but you can't get exegesis courses at conferences. And I always tell my students that and say, now I'm the director of the MDiv. I think your ministry courses are incredibly valuable. I think your whole curriculum is really important, but this is one you're going to have a hard time learning somewhere else outside of seminary.
Yeah. At the end of these episodes, we're not at the end yet, but at the end we always have a parting shot, is what we call it. And so we have a quote. So if you're able to get a quote handy and rustle up a quote for the end of the episode, that'd be awesome. Yeah. I also, I was wondering, did you ever switch back to sort of Hawaii for a minute?
Yeah.
Did you ever do surfing while you were here or no?
Well, I did a lot of body surfing, bodyboarding, I should say. I grew up on the windward side, so I love that. But then when I got to college, I switched over to kayaking, and that became where I wanted to put just to be honest, my money. Everything you pick, it's going to cost something. And so I had a kayak. I had a kayak that was really good at catching waves, and also could handle distance. It was kind of a specialty one, so I could paddle out to the Mokuluas and catch waves out where the longboarders. I would tend to catch waves where the longboarders were, and that was just when I finally sold that kayak when I left Hawaii. That was a sad day because that was just something I enjoyed so much, going out to to see the sea turtles and see the land on little islands and then catch some waves for a while.
Yeah, I mean, for those of you listening, if you've never swam with the Hawaiian sea turtles, there's few things in life that are as amazing as that's one of my favorite things to do is just photograph those guys and watch them just glide through the water. And
I've followed them underwater snorkeling, and they'll just kind of look over I remember following one, and he keeps looking over his shoulder at me. And at the time, I didn't know there was a law that you're not allowed to touch them. But so I just snuck up behind it, and I thought, I could grab onto this, and I touched it. And then you find out how fast they are, because they look really slow, and then suddenly zoom, it was off like a shot. And then he looked back at me, and I kept trying to follow it until I ran out of air. They're beautiful, and I mean, so many other fish, and wonderful things to see underwater, on top of the water. Yeah, I miss that a lot.
Yeah. I think you told me, now I might be wrong, so correct me if I'm wrong. I think you told me a story once of how you got into Greek, and I don't know, it might have had to do with like a comic or some. Tell me your first experience with that. I remember that being a cool story. I don't remember the details.
Yeah. Well, Aside from, growing up in church where you hear occasionally about Greek, I always thought that was cool. But so I was a major Lord of the Rings fan, as in read it over and over and over again, long before the movies. And then some people may not know, but Tolkien was a linguist, and he invented languages that work.
Yeah.
They actually are working languages. He invented Elvish and Dwarvish, and Elvish is what he really spent most of his time on, two dialects that he spent a lot of time on. And so as much as I could from The Lord of the Rings, I was learning Elvish without really any formal, I didn't know much about languages, so I did what I could. This was, 7th, 8th grade, so I was very nerdy, read these things over and over again. And then I had an experience that was really important for my future academia, but more important for my spiritual life. And that is I grabbed my worn out copy and I started to read it again one summer. And my mom walked in and saw me reading again Fellowship of the Ring. And she said something like, the Bible has just as much cool language and historical background. Because she knew why I liked it. I explained why I would read these over and over again, the rich history that Tolkien invented the language. And I remember thinking, she's right. I'm a kid who loves to read, but I don't read the Bible. What's wrong here? There's something going on here that's not right, And I actually went to a camp at Bellows Beach a few weeks later, and they sent us off into the woods to pray for an hour. And here I am, 13-year-old kid. What? You're maybe 14. Pray for an hour? What is this? So, I just began to pray and thought, what? This thing my mom told me, this is hitting me. There's something wrong with me not wanting to read the Bible when I love to read, period. That's what I prayed about. And a few weeks later, started school. I had a long bus commute across the island. It was interesting. I just dropped my Bible in my backpack, and I remember thinking, I didn't plan to do that. It just happened. And then for years, going back and forth across the island, first to high school and then later to the University of Hawaii, I would have these commutes over and over again, a lot of times by bus, and I would just read the Bible. So that would end up with being an hour and a half of Bible reading a day. And it wasn't even a discipline. It was just like, oh, this is cool. I like this because I love the stuff here, and got interested in Greek and Hebrew. Didn't do much with it, as a 13 or 14-year-old. But when I got to the University of Hawaii, it was as soon as I saw there was an opportunity to learn Greek. It wasn't my major, wasn't my degree, but I was going to learn. I didn't even have a language requirement for my degree. I was going to learn Greek. So that was a really important, thing that changed my life, and then also I think made me start thinking about biblical languages, historical background, which are key to my academic work today.
Yeah, I love that. What school did you go to, by the way? What high school?
I went to Punahou.
Okay, all right.
For those who are not here, that was where Barack Obama went. He's a little bit older than me, but he was at that school. Yeah.
We just my daughter's varsity basketball team just played them at Punahou last night.
Oh yeah.
Sorry, we beat Punahou, but
yeah.
Boy, that's a beautiful campus, huh?
It is. Yeah.
Yeah, that's bigger than some college campuses.
Yeah. Was it 2,000 students, something like that? Yeah.
Yeah.
No, more than that. It's 3,000. It's 3,000 students. Yeah. It's a big school. One of the way bigger than private schools you find elsewhere in the country in general.
So you get to the beach much or the ocean much these days, or?
Well, I still remember when we first moved here, somebody said, we want to take you to a beach that reminds us of Hawaii. And we got there and we were terribly disappointed. No, I'm sorry. This is nothing like, I grew up in Kailua and Kaneohe, and Kailua Beach is regularly listed as the best beach in the world. And that's just what I grew up with. So, but sometimes my wife and I will get down to San Diego, and there we find, these beaches are okay. You don't have to wear a wetsuit to get in the water.
That's funny.
So we've done a little bit more. We go up to the mountains sometimes, but never really gotten back into the ocean.
It's hard once you've lived in Hawaii for any amount of time to not sort of become a beach snob. Even if you're not trying to be a beach snob, there's just nothing quite like it. We flew to Florida a couple of years ago, and I can't remember where we went, but I just remember thinking, this ain't a beach.
Yeah, there's
We're
water.
looking at the ocean, standing in the sand, and thinking, this ain't a beach.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I had no idea until I moved away from Hawaii just what we had. Now it's only, as an adult, when I come back to visit, I think, oh yes, here's what I grew up with, and I had no clue how beautiful it was, and how wonderful it was to grow up there.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing place, kind of magical, really.
Yeah. And I love. I was involved in planting a church there, and it's involved in various kinds of ministry. And there's something I love about the way the church is in Hawaii.
What church is it?
So I helped plant Faith Christian Fellowship, which met not far from where you guys meet. And I was involved in Youth for Christ before that, doing youth evangelism, discipleship, things like that. I grew up at Faith Baptist Church on the Windward side.
Okay. Wow. Yeah. Wow. Are you serving in a local church in any capacity these days, or?
Yeah, just as a volunteer. I go to Redemption Hill Church, which is near Biola, and there's quite a few Biola people there. Mainly just co-teach an adult Sunday school class with another professor here, Alan Hultberg. I fill in the pulpit when I'm asked to, which is I love to do that, and occasionally preach at other churches when I'm invited. That's kind of the main thing. I've served in a few other. I write curriculum for small groups. So yeah,
interestingly, Glosa House has like inroads with a bunch of people that are now at Biola. So
yes,
working with you and Carmen Imes and Dominic Hernandez.
Yeah, we were just sitting at lunch today, the three of us, for a faculty meeting. We had a lunch together. So yeah,
nice. And I think Carmen will be on the podcast soon. And then Doug Huffman.
Yep. Mm-hmm. He's the he's the chair for the undergrad department here in the New Testament.
He's working on a volume for us. So quite a few Biola Talbot people, working with Glosa House, which is pretty exciting.
Yeah, we have
Sorry, go ahead. Yeah.
Oh, we just have a rich between our undergrad departments and our grad departments, just a really rich community, and the opportunity to be around a lot of scholars that are, they're impressive. You always get the feeling like, it sort of motivates me because I write, but I don't write at the pace of some of my colleagues because I have a big family, and so it kind of motivates me when I see them producing such good work. So
yeah. This is a lot of good stuff. Coming out of there these days, and we're fortunate to be working with you and some of your colleagues there. So Glosa House producing some good resources.
It is, it's pretty impressive.
So we're going into, I think we just finished year 10, so I think we're heading into year 11.
Wow.
That we've been at this, and we've got some good stuff coming down the pipeline.
And did you guys start this like right after you finished your PhD work, or how did that start?
Yeah, it was right near the end. I think we started right before I finished my PhD work, and that started the way that it came about is Fred and I have a little bit different versions of the story.
Oh,
my version of the story is I was trying to create some Greek resources, and they were mainly audio based. I was pitching these to Baker and Zondervan, all the big names, and the sort of blanket response was, we don't have the capacity or the framework to do that kind of thing right now. And so I got fed up with that. We talked to another publisher, and we were really close to inking a deal with them, and then it just didn't work out. And so we just started, and started creating audio, video, print resources straight away. But our very first project ended up being a hexapla. And
right.
I was in my PhD program, and we were wanting to, I was wanting to keep up with the biblical languages. And so Fred and I came up with the idea to create this sort of interlinear hexapla where it could keep up with Hebrew, Greek, Latin, English, French, German.
Yeah, so, I love that, because that's before, that's sort of like when I was learning French and German for my doctoral work, I got a parallel German-Greek Bible. Yeah. And I made sure it was a Luther, because sometimes it's so literal to the Greek that it would help me. I could read the Greek and see exactly what the Luther did. Picked up a French Bible. When I was learning Hebrew, I would bring my Septuagint to class. I'm sure that did not, necessarily make my Hebrew prof happy, but I just wanted to see what my Greek wasn't very good yet, but I wanted to kind of think about the languages together. So I think that's a great way. I'm often, when I'm listening to somebody teach, my brain is kind of running off in too many directions. So I'll pull up an app and read the passage we're looking at in several languages, and I think that's. I
remember
keep them alive.
Director of our program at Asbury, Dave Bauer. I don't know if he'll appreciate me telling this story or not, but I'm going to tell it. He was saying he realized he had a call to be a professor and not a pastor when he was doing a pastoral visit to an elderly lady in the congregation one day. And she's telling him about all her issues that she's dealing with. And while she's talking, he's parsing Greek verbs in his head.
Yeah.
That was the moment I knew I was supposed to be a professor.
Yep. I was noticing this weekend. We were singing, and I noticed there was a biblical allusion in the worship song, and I immediately was seeing it in Greek, the biblical allusion in Greek. But I don't need to tell this to the people around me.
That's funny. That's great. So you're working on a John commentary.
Yeah.
And, you mentioned you had a big family. I've seen how many kids you have. I've seen some pictures, and you definitely have a big family.
Yeah, we have 10 kids. So we now we've just reached the halfway point in terms of kids moving out. So we're now down to 4 or 5. 5. I have one son who's away at school, and he'll be back soon. But we're down to 4 or 5. Wow. So it's a busy, very busy life.
10 kids, you and your wife. That's 12. It's like the 12 tribes of Manning there.
That's right. Yeah.
Wow.
Yep.
Man.
Yeah, we adopted 2 kids while we were still in Hawaii before moving here to teach at Biola, and then we adopted 2 more here. So we have a mixed family of biological and adopted kids.
Wow, well, bless you, man. We've adopted a few, and I'll tell you that can be a challenging road.
Yeah.
Yep. It's a different animal.
It is. Yeah. Yep. Every now and then I think I should write something about it, and then I think, nope, not going to do that. It's just there's too much going on still, and it's of course something that we know God loves that, but it's really hard.
Yep. Well, one day you'll have to write something about that. I think the world needs to hear. I mean, you got a unique perspective with a crew that size. So, wow. Well, bless you. I mentioned before that at the end of the episode, we'd like to do a parting shot, as we call it, which is a quote. Were you able to rustle something up?
Oh, let me. Yeah. I have like a 11-page document filled with filled with quotes here on why learn Greek and Hebrew. But I think one that I really like, the Spurgeon talked in his book Commenting and Commentaries, talked a little bit about how to misuse and how to use Greek and Hebrew. it says here, he says, as a general rule, it may be observed that those gentlemen who know the least Greek are the most sure to air their rags of learning in the pulpit. He was a little harsh sometimes. They miss no chance of saying the Greek is so-and-so. It makes a man an inch and a half taller by a foolometer. I don't know what that means, but he says something that could be overstated, I think, and it often is, but he's got a point here. The whole process of interpretation is to be carried out in your study. You are not to show your congregation the process, but to give them the result, like a good cook. Never think of bringing up dishes and pans and rolling pin and spice box into the dining hall, but without ostentation serves up the feast. And I don't know if I'd say, I think that's one piece of advice to add in.
Yeah.
It's not the whole thing, but certainly I think it's helpful to see it as this is the stuff you have to do behind the scenes. A good cook needs all those things, dishes and pans and spice boxes. If they don't have it, they're not going to do a good job, but they don't always have to communicate those don't always have to be shown,
right.
From the pulpit. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's one I found.
I think there's something to that. I mean, I think on occasion there's that occasion where you need to bring out hey, this is the special knife I used, or this is the special ingredient I used, and this is why it tastes so good, and let people peek behind the curtain sometimes. But
I agree. Yeah.
I love the beginning of that, especially about the one who's got so little is often the most assured.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. I think I was looking for a particular one, but it didn't come up in my short time there. But either Wesley or Spurgeon said something like, one of the reasons to do this is if you don't, the reason to study the original language is you're at the mercy of those who do or claim to. There are so many times that weird claims are believed because somebody throws out a Greek word. I mean, all over social media.
Yes.
I don't know what the percentage is, but I would guess that somewhere around 75 to 85% of claims about Greek and Hebrew, more if you go to Hebrew, that you find in social media are just not correct.
Right.
Incorrect use.
It's almost like a resuscitation or resurrection of that whole like Holy Spirit Greek or Holy Spirit Hebrew idea that existed decades ago when before we were doing sort of philological research and realizing that New Testament Greek wasn't magical, but they used to kind of think it was. And that it's almost becoming like that again today. You get into these crazy gematria videos. And, then you have all the people getting incorrectly pointed or whatever Hebrew tattoos or man, it's wild out there. Yeah, wild.
And some of it's harmless. It's like, okay, it's a pretty little lie, But some of it, what happens is because people get used to claims about the text that have nothing to do with the text that they read. You know what I mean by that? Like they say, oh, this word really means that, which totally changes the meaning of the text. They get used to that. So then they are open to when people are making very seriously bad claims about the Christian life or about theology, because they say, well, I do this all the time. I believe that these Greek or Hebrew words have a basically different meaning from what shows up in my English translation. So sure, I'll believe that too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Wow. Well, I see those even pop up on that nerdy biblical language majors. Yeah. People will occasionally say, hey, somebody posted this video making this outrageous claim. What do you guys think? And boy, it's like, that's like throwing a piece of steak to a pack of wolves. Everybody
piles on. Yeah, it gets a little out of hand sometimes.
Well, yeah, man, I appreciate the work you're doing, and glad to have you working with Glossa House. And
it's a privilege.
Yeah, glad to see I think you're doing a ministry there online. I mean, I would consider that a ministry. Yeah,
it is. Yeah.
See that online ministry you got going, and among the other things, raising 10 kids, and so thanks for just carving out a little bit of time to chat with me today. And
glad to. A lot of fun.
Yeah, so perhaps we can do it again, and Yeah, thanks to everybody that's listening to the podcast and now watching, now that we're doing these videos. By the way, Gary, we just started, we're really just now starting to do the video form of the podcast in 2023. And we're calling these interview sessions People We Love. So hopefully you feel loved by that.
Yes.
We appreciate you, man, and keep up the good work that you're doing. And thanks for taking some time out for us today.
All right. You too, Michael.
All right. Aloha.
Interested in growing your ancient language skills but not sure where to start? Glossa House can help. From illustrated readers and short stories to lexicons and grammars, Glossa House offers a variety of resources for beginning, intermediate, and experienced ancient language learners. Head to glossahouse.com today. Glossa House, language resources for the global community.